and this should be something like this. C should be something like this, and I can be 34, or yeah, 23 will work. Okay, so now we have initialized the value. So basically this is just a review. So this assignment operator, when our compiler faces, or when our compiler encounters this assignment operator, it looks at the right hand side. So it looks at the right hand side, and it finds that this integer constant actually matches the value with the data type, or it agrees, or this constant actually agrees with the data type. And then what the compiler does, uh, it actually takes this integer constant and tells the memory through this assignment operator that assign this value inside the variable I. So this is just the basic review from our previous part. So now we are going to move on to the format specifier. So before we can move on to that, let's bring up the printf function again. So we have looked at the printf function earlier, and printf function is actually used to display some sort of data, display any message on the command prompt, and we can use it to even plug or call in data, just as we have seen earlier, or a moment ago, that we can even display numeric values like decimal numbers or float or double, or numbers that are of data type float and double. We can also show whole numbers like integers. But what happens when we have a huge number which is decimal, and we see that our command prompt is actually displaying a data that's huge? Then again, we also have a problem that how do we actually display data that's character, how do we actually display data that's float, and how do you actually display data that's double, and how are what are the difference between the display of data when it comes to integer, characters, floats, and double? So we're going to look at that right now. Before, we have seen something like this. So the format specifier actually starts with the percentage symbol, and then it goes on something like this, just like we have actually seen this earlier. So if I write something like this, or I am calling in the variable I, and then I'm telling it to print that value on my command prompt or on the display. So let me run this. So as you can see, the printf function is displaying the data, which is the integer constant of 23, or more precisely, this is a positive integer constant, which is 23. So if we analyze this code, this simple code, it's what we see that, let's actually go step by step. So first we assign a positive integer constant through the assignment operator to this variable called I. Now we call the printf function. Now you can't bring the printf function if you don't actually add this header, which is include standard input and output. I'll be discussing about this header files, or this include directive, later on. But let's focus on the printf function. Just remember, for the timing, or right now, you need to remember that you must include this include standard input and output. So this printf function is bringing in the variable I, or more precisely, it's calling the variable I. But when it calls the variable I, it knows that there is a value that's stored inside that variable called I, and that variable is an integer value, integer variable. So hence, this variable will contain a value that might be a negative integer constant, or it might also be a positive integer constant. So our compiler will now be assured that this variable will contain a positive or a negative integer constant. Then it moves inside the memory. So when it moves inside the memory, it finds that this variable I contains a value of 23, or this is a positive integer constant. So our compiler then replaces this variable name of I with the value of 23, and then it plugs this value of 23 with this format specifier. Now this format specifier is essentially or explicitly designed to plug in or bring in any integer value, or you can actually display any integer value using this format specifier.